be in it at all? Don't be shy.
I'll just.
Do you want to come in? Do you want to talk about it? It was a big week for 100 Thieves. How are you feeling?
Hey, we winning. We winning.
A game.
A game. Listen, okay. They're still in the run.
We got to win one more
One
to guarantee
more.
playoffs.
There's one more, right? And then if we're going to start in a loser's bracket, that's fine. Double Lift has done it before.
Yes,
you
he
know
has.
The vibes. Let's go.
He's never started from loser's bracket, though.
Oh,
I don't think.
I believe that we can win. I believe that we can win.
I will take it. So, week 5 of the LCS for 100 Thieves, and let's just say it didn't start off well whatsoever. A game that we just really needed to win against Immortals to try and make sure that we just squared this all away and build ourselves a 3-game lead over FlyQuest going into the final week. We couldn't get it done. We somehow give Immortals their first win in their 10-game loss streak. And I'll lump this in with the Cloud9 game because there's really not much to talk about with the Cloud9 game. They should have beaten us, they did. But just Closer, it's a recurring theme at this point that Closer's not able to make it work, quite frankly. He's not proactive enough. He's not doing enough during these early to mid-game stages. Even during the Cloud9 series, you saw him make plays towards bot on his patented Lee Sin. And even then, it just it felt like we still couldn't do anything. When you compare that directly to how Piosik just played Lee Sin today and was kicking people into the Nico knockups from APA, it's just that's it. Where's that? And it just hasn't been around. So those 2 losses were definitely rough. But at the end of the day, we've built, weirdly enough, with 5 wins, we built ourselves enough of a cushion to not have to worry about it over FlyQuest. So with today's win against TSM, which notably we haven't lost literally all year to them. Phenomenal that we went undefeated. Great. And hopefully we play against them in the playoffs upcoming. We are now literally 1 win away. Now there is a scenario where Immortals can win out, and currently the Immortals Dignitas game is ongoing. And there is a scenario where we can have a 3-way tiebreaker, all with the same record that overrides it. But in the case where us and FlyQuest are tied, we hold the 2-0 tiebreaker. We don't have to worry about anything. We just got to win one more game. And Dignitas, I think, is a winnable game. NRG and Golden Guardians have both looked good. But if we want to honestly stand any sort of chance in playoffs anyways, we got to do something here. So there's no excuse. We just simply got to get it done. I got the chance to talk to Someday yesterday, and he definitely was a little bit down after a loss, which you expect to a certain extent. You don't plan on players being just this optimistic, overly energetic, even after a loss. But he notably said that he's actually taken some responsibility and leadership on this team, which I found interesting because Someday's always kind of been the quiet guy. He's never really been the one to step up and take control of these situations. But, I mean, hey, if he is, then hopefully it works out for us. I know this isn't going to be a very review-heavy episode of TFC, but that's because there's so many other things outside of the Rift that we kind of have to talk about in regards to 100 Thieves news this week that take more of a priority. Our schedule, I'll put down below, as I mentioned before. We just have to win some of those games, and that is what it is. We know our position. It just kind of is there. Last night, there was a lot of drama around LS and LCS EV putting out that apparently we were looking at potentially replacing Busio with Biofrost, but we couldn't get it done. It fell through one way or another. Jungle Juice, who is our general manager of 100 Thieves, came out and said, this is just simply untrue. LCS EV responds and says something along the lines of, my sources have confirmed this to me, multiple people have kind of reached out, walking through the logical steps, which I did on Twitter and on TikTok, so I'm going to keep this brief, is that LCS EV, his incentive to lie would be that he wants to gain popularity, but he doesn't really have a reason to do that. His reputation is important when it comes to being able to get these leaks from other people and put them out there and maintain credibility. He'll mess up on a few things, and he has notably messed up. Previously, he reported that Jojo Pune was going to go to EG, or not Jojo Pune, sorry, Tenacity was going to go to EG when he was actually starting for 100 Thieves. That might have been discussions early on, we don't know, but it didn't happen. But his incentive to lie is ultimately not that good. It's just a matter of whether he vets the proper reporting or not. For 100 Thieves, there is incentive to lie there to make sure that you're damage controlling a situation that would honestly be really bad, because the press that would come out from having Biofrost replace Busio would be tremendous. Not only from people memeing us for once again relying on Biofrost and caving into double lift rather than standing our ground as an org in our development, but more importantly, we start the year with these two pillars in Tenacity and Busio, and if you get rid of both of them by the end of the year, that you lose faith in all of your development systems, and like just perception goes out the window. So I'm not going to talk about this anymore. I already ranted about it yesterday. It didn't happen, so we're going to live in the now, in the moment, and that this is our roster, and hopefully next year Busio stays with the team, but notably he is a free agent, which leads into the final portion of this conversation that Nate Schott, John Robinson, Joe, and Malik, who used to be with Optic, now with 100 Thieves, they all sat down today for a podcast discussing the business of 100 Thieves esports and what to expect over the next few years. Now, I'm not fully done with it at the time of recording this, but there's two key notes that I want to hit on that are going to be very influential and important to 100 Thieves fans and how we react to the years to come of our LCS roster and how we build this team. First is that 100 Thieves has set an internal deadline that they want all of their different segments to be profitable, or break even by the end of next year, which means you're going to see a severe reduction on salary spend. In order to be break even, for those that don't understand, you need to manage all of the revenues coming in with all of your expenses and make sure they net out to zero. So we cannot be spending any more money than we are earning, whether that is via the LCS themselves and the stipend that we get from them for our revenue share for the overall league, or with sponsorships, most notably Subway being like the headlining partner. We don't know how much they're giving us in terms of dollar value and content building and like everything else that we get from them, but nevertheless, how much we spend on salary for our players, our coaches, but also our share of our operating expenses, including the use of the facility for the 100 Thieves, like compound, whatever it's like named and titled after now. Like, we incur costs, our share of that portion. Like, the LCS team gets a segment of that cost as likely an allocation. So it's not just player salaries that you need to be concerned about. So say we have a budget of 1.5 million, just completely making that number up between LCS and our sponsorship number. Between all of that, you need to balance that out. So salaries, say, can be like 50% of that, and then your OPEX or your operating costs have to be the other 50% because you need to make sure you're paying food and everything else I mentioned before. So with that in mind, we are going to likely be seeing what most LCS fans are used to calling a budget roster, but with league salaries dropping, John Robinson said on Reddit that we'll actually be closer to league averages. So we're not going to be full budget. It's just going to be, we're not dishing out cash for the best rosters possible, which I think is going to be a good thing, but it also spells problems with, like, you're not going to pay high price for Someday or Double Lift, whose contracts are up. If Busio gets a big offer from somewhere else, you could potentially give him up as well if he's not willing to take the pay that we need to stay on our team. But then you do have people on contract like Yukino and General Sniper that you can rely on that have lower deals that ultimately make this budget work. The second and final big takeaway, which is kind of related to that, is something that John Robinson said that I think everybody should hear verbatim.
Over the longer term, I bet people will just realize that 2018 to 2021 was just like this huge aberration, and are going to have to look at that separately from the entire history of esports, because from the early days, from when you were playing up until about 2017, like, none of the teams were super well funded, right? It was like, we're gonna pay people as much as we're making from our sponsors and from what we get from the publishers, right? And it was only during this crazy kind of like 4-year period when there was so much invested in teams that teams were losing a lot of money. And I think we're now going through what'll be a year or two of transition. And I think on the tail end of that, it's going to get back to where we started originally, which is what we make from our sponsors and what we make from the publishers. We are going to reinvest in building the best teams we possibly can. But that's what we can afford. But I think what's important to share, though, is not that we are holding esports to a higher level of accountability or a different level of accountability or profitability than other parts of our business. This is a change that we've made across everything that we do, whether it's esports or content or apparel or high ground or juvie or what we're doing with the video game. We are asking all of our businesses to hit a threshold level of break even for next year.
There is a stigma in esports right now that when you're not spending top dollar, you don't care. And personally, I think as we enter this new era where we basically go back to where we were and we're not mass overspending, it's going to be important for fans to understand the expectations that come with that. There are still going to be teams like FlyQuest who get new management, and that new management wants to come in and make a splash and buy out a big roster. But if FlyQuest has shown you anything, when you look at the viewership that exists within the LCS right now, it's like the FlyQuest games aren't even breaking the top, whereas 100 Thieves right now, mostly in part with Doublelift, still are. Money doesn't buy you fans. It buys you the opportunity to build them. And we've spent our money, we've had our chance to build our fans, and I feel like 100 Thieves has a pretty solid base at its core. It's now just a matter of growing that within a reasonable budget. And I think that's entirely fair. And I really do want to make sure that 100 Thieves fans know that, yes, there's a chance that our roster next year has lower salary than some teams. We don't contend for a title, but that's perfectly fine. It's about performing relative to expectations. That's why, our performance right now in the LCS is such a problem, because it's like, okay, even though we had some development players like Quid, like Busio, Tenacity, you still expected us to be a little bit higher, all things considered, than where we're at, or at least relatively better. I don't think people would complain if we were, closer to 500, like 6-6, 7-7 mark. People still wouldn't be happy, especially the Doublelift stands, but ultimately, just have reasonable expectations. And look, I'll be here to help guide you through that and help set what I think are reasonable expectations for our teams. Obviously, hype up the high moments, give us the kick in the ass that we might need for the down moments. I'm ultimately really happy that we are returning back to pre-2018 times. It's sustainable. It's better for esports long term. And it doesn't mean that leagues are dying, that teams are dying, that esports is going away. I'm in a PC cafe right now recording this. When I tell you that gaming is alive and strong, it is. It's just a matter of whether you're willing to buy into our teams long term, even when the money's not there. The content will still be there, whether it's from the teams or people like myself, and hopefully I can provide an outlet for some of you fans to resonate with, and we can all bond together and show up to events just like the old school Green Wall days were for me, and still somewhat are in Call of Duty. But that's the important part. The love for esports ultimately comes down to us, the fans, mobilizing, supporting both physically and financially, and that's just what it is. So that's it for this week's TFC. A little bit different format, a little bit more business oriented, but personally I love the business side of it, so I could talk about this for hours. And please go watch that podcast with Sean Robinson, Nate Shot, and crew. It's amazing. And yeah, see you next week for hopefully our chance at securing playoffs, and if not, it's going to be really freaking depressing. Adios.